Blog Talk Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to episode 24 of the show about the show. This is also going to be episode 2 of my Collector's Corner series. I have Drew Herndon on with me today. Drew is a great guy who has a very, very cool podcast that he co-hosts with Stu Payne. It can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, and pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. You know, just the odd, 9, 10, 12, 30 different broadcast locations. So make sure that you are listening to him if you collect baseball or football or basketball or hockey stuff. If you are into the hobby of collecting and autographs, you will want to listen to them. Their podcast is called Let Me Get That Podagraph. It is very, very, very clever, and I am so happy and pleased to have on with me Drew Herndon. We are going to talk a little bit about everything. We're going to talk about the hobby and how the sports world affects it. We are also going to talk about how the show came to be about, as well as a few other things. So, without any further ado, good evening, Drew.
What's up, buddy? Glad to finally be able to be on the show. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on. So, one of the cool things about your show is you guys have a unique podcast. It's a podcast where you're dedicated to one specific thing, and that's the hobby of it. Can you talk about how you and Stu came up with the idea to do that?
Absolutely. So I was in collecting big time when I was a little kid, and then I got out of it like most kids do, when you're in high school and college and you're doing everything else. And then a couple of years ago, I had my son, and I immediately wanted to get back into the hobby because it brought back memories of me collecting as I was growing up. So I jumped headfirst back into the hobby and found that I loved it. I missed it. I loved it. It had changed so much since the 90s. I'm 33, so, I grew up in the early 90s collecting cards. And from there to now, it's just changed so much. It blew me away, and I fell right back in love. And then, I was thinking I was a journalism major from East Carolina. I've done a lot of freelance writing, a lot of college radio, lots of different stuff. And I always wanted to do a podcast. And I was actually talking with Brooke Francisco, who works at Beckett Authentication Services. We were chatting one night through private message, and I was like, we should do a podcast. And she said she couldn't do it because of Beckett, but we were brainstorming names, and thought the second name that popped out was Let Me Get That Podagraph. And she said, oh, that's perfect. And I laughed, and the name was born. And then it just so happened that I was looking for a co-host, and Stu replied to a post I did in a card room, and the rest is history. We had never met before. We knew each other as both being diehard Carolina Panther fans and diehard Panther collectors, but, we'd never met in person or anything like that. Just knew we lived close by, and we met, and the chemistry was there immediately, and we decided to give it a shot, and so far everybody's been loving it, and it's been getting bigger every week, and off to the races we went.
Do you have a favorite sport to collect? Because I know you guys talk a lot about all the different sports, and you mentioned the Panthers and things like that. Do you have a favorite sport to collect?
Yeah, I've always been a football guy. Now, growing up, I was a big baseball collector and actually hockey collector more than anything. I grew up playing hockey in South Florida. I know it sounds weird, but it's very big down there. And so I grew up playing all sports, but hockey was my main sport. So I grew up collecting hockey, but when I got back into it, we've been Panther season ticket holders since their very first season. And so Panther football has been my life since I was a very, very little kid. And football is my main sport, but I love collecting all the sports. I have a team in all sports. Baseball is a little tough because I'm a Marlins fan, so not too much to collect there and not too much to be happy about. But I love collecting baseball because baseball is the one sport that's different than any other sport when it comes to collecting, and it intrigues me and it's a lot of fun. Like the way baseball is nowadays in collecting is so different from the past, and it really is it's really exciting, and it's a real year-long investment.
That's a great point, too. Baseball collecting, more than other sports, does seem to have a niche that the other sports don't have. I mean, I don't know a lot about collecting other sports stuff. I stick to only baseball, but I know just this year, Topps has already come out with Series 1. Heritage, they're coming out with Allen and Ginter. They just came out with Opening Day, and they have and they came out with Donruss, and they got Bowman coming out. When it's baseball, even though it's all these different companies, it's really two. It's Topps and Panini. Can you talk about how much fun it is to be a collector and to try to collect that stuff? Because like you mentioned, baseball is unlike any other. Hello? All right. Well, I think, ladies and gentlemen, we must have gotten disconnected or something. We're gonna try to get Drew back in here. I think his signal must have cut out, which is unfortunate. Yeah, the call did drop, so I do apologize about that. We are working on getting Drew back in here, but one of the things that baseball offers, like I said, is and Drew is back.
Hey, what's up, buddy? I don't know what happened there.
No, that's all right. Can you talk about the niche that baseball has? I was just kind of mentioning that baseball, so far this year, Topps has already released Series 1, Heritage. They've released, there's Donruss, there's Bowman, there is
Opening Day,
Gypsy Queen coming up. Yeah, and you've got all these different. Can you talk about how much fun it is to be a baseball collector?
Oh, absolutely. Baseball is one of those products that, like I said, they're different than any other sport for a couple of reasons. And the biggest reason is you've got a ton of guys that have been collecting just baseball for 60, 70 years now. And so they're the normal set builders. Then you have products like Heritage, you have a subset of die-hard collectors. Like, these guys want to build this Heritage set, and it's almost impossible to build. And so you've got that little niche. But then you go into prospects and rookies, and that's where baseball really differs from everybody else. In baseball, if you're collecting all the products like Bowman and stuff like that, you're following these guys from literally their first step into minor league ball, all the way through AAA, all the way through their pro career. So you're really following these guys, from right out of high school, a lot of them. And it's real interesting because you've got guys that go after, they call them first Bowmans, which that's before they've become a pro player, they have cards in Bowman. And so you've got guys that are prospect collectors that think those are like the true rookie card. But then once they make the major league roster, they get their official rookie cards. And so, there's prospect collectors, there's rookie collectors, there's team collectors. There's so many different types of subsets in baseball. That's what makes it fun for me, because being a Marlins fan, I've learned a long time ago, after Dontrell Willis and Jeff Conine left and the glory years were over and Laurie was just out to screw the team, I learned a long time ago that my Marlin guys weren't going to be there. So I just focused on collecting baseball just because I love the sport. I think it's a beautiful sport. It's one of my favorites. And it's really interesting to watch the collecting habit of baseball. Like, take Aaron Judge, for example. Aaron Judge has had cards out since about 2013 or 14. Those cards were literally worthless until he became a rookie. And so a lot of people had this guy in their commons box, which is term for, cards that aren't worth much. And then all of a sudden last year, they see this guy cranking home runs and becoming the most sought-after collectible baseball player in years. You go digging through those boxes and you're sitting on a gold mine. So a lot of times it's a 3-4 year wait before you even know if these guys are going to be superstars. And so baseball is a real interesting concept. I use the term day trading a lot when I go with cards, because that's a lot how it is these days. With eBay sales, it's really up and down by like games they play, streaks they're on, and stuff like that. It's a day trading type of market, but baseball is almost one of those where you hold the stocks for a couple of years if you choose to go with prospects. And, a lot of it's turned out to be, you're sitting on $5,000-$6,000 cards that 2 years ago were worth nothing. And so it's a really, really interesting sport to collect.
It's also a very, very expensive hobby to have. As somebody who collects strictly baseball, I can tell you it's very expensive. Although it is very expensive. Yes, although it would be much more expensive if I was a fan of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, because in the Topps Heritage set that just came out, they are in the style of the 1969 cards. There is the much heralded autograph of the Japanese Babe Ruth, Shohei Ohtani. And Drew, I saw a red autograph on there for the Heritage. They do red and blue. I saw a red autograph on eBay sell for $5,200.
Yep, that was his first official auto that came out. And so that's why you saw those premiums. The blue base are selling for about $1,000, and the reds were selling for, like you said, between $4,500 and $5,500. And it's mind blowing to me. And now I will say this for collectors: don't run out and buy that Heritage at that price, because once Bowman comes out, once Topps Chrome comes out, and all these other better products come out, those products are going to drop significantly. But that pricing right there shows you one of the main things about baseball collectors. They are itching to get back into collecting, because most sports don't really have an off season in terms of releasing cards. They try and do it year round. Baseball kind of takes a month and a half off, at least Topps, who has the exclusive agreement with them. They take a little bit of time off and really bombard you when spring training starts, because they know that's when all that hype begins and all those prospects start doing something. And so baseball collectors really know that, they're about to get hit with a lot of products, and they get ready for it. And they're a die-hard group of collectors, and I myself am one of them. I couldn't wait to bust into some Heritage. No Ohtani for me, unfortunately, but they're itching and dying to get into it, and Heritage was a perfect example of that. And just wait till you see Bowman come out, because he's done a lot of neat things with his autographs. All you've seen so far is his basic signature, but a lot of stuff he's doing this year includes Japanese writing and Japanese inscriptions and stuff like that, along with his autograph. He really took a lot of time signing this stuff, which as a collector I can really appreciate, because when you have a football player like Dalvin Cook who can't even write the letters D and C together properly, it's really nice to see somebody, take some time in signing these cards that people are going to keep forever. And so he really did a great job with all of that, and I think that's probably from the culture he grew up in. But I will say this, the Heritage autos look nice. I love the 1969 design, but when those Bowman and Topps Chrome autos and stuff like that come out, that's when you're going to see some Ohtanis going for quite a bit of money, if he lives up to that hype.
That's always a big if in the game of baseball. And I want to touch on something that you brought up earlier, which I find really, really interesting, and I agree with you 100%, and I've always said too. The thing about baseball that you mentioned was, because of cards like Bowman and because of things like social media, we're able to basically track these guys from the moment they're in, sometimes even in junior high or high school, all the way up to the day they get drafted, the day they sign, when they hit A-ball, all the way up to the majors, etc. And one of the things about that it allows that baseball has is it has that level where you're in the minor leagues. Now football doesn't have that. You go from being, you have college football, but not a lot of people play 4 years of college football. Basketball doesn't have that. They have the NBDL, but they don't do, 4 years of NBDL. Hockey doesn't do that. They have college hockey, but very few, So baseball gives you kind of that 4 years to cultivate that. And I think that's part of the reason baseball collectors are kind of a different breed than everybody else.
That's absolutely correct. And, the other sports I think are coming along on that. I think basketball in particular you're going to see. I think once March Madness is over and the FBI really hammers down on basketball, I think you're going to see the NBA start to kind of have a minor league system similar to baseball. But that is one thing about baseball that makes it, so much different than everyone else. Like the football guys, they can sign right when they're out of high school before they go to college, but then they're stuck until after they're out. But baseball guys, you're signing, if you go buy a pack of Elite Extra Edition, you're probably going to get an autograph of a guy on the 16 or 18 and under team. So, they've got autographs as far back as when they're on the U.S. team. And then once you get into the Bowman products, you always have those guys that are supposedly the next hot prospect, and sometimes those guys will be that next hot prospect for 4 or 5 years before they even sniff a pro field. And by the time they do, really interesting to watch their value. If the hype is still there, the value will be there. But more times than not, and I've seen it a ton with Tyler O'Neill, tons of players like that just, they have this minor league hype that's astronomical, but by the time they make it there, it's just gone. And so it's a very, very interesting thing because, like I said, then you have the judges who nobody thought anything about him. He was not expected to do half of what he did, and then as soon as he sniffed the pro dirt, it was another man was born. And so it's a very, very, if any card collecting could be a guessing game, there's no more of a guessing game than baseball.
And that's also, I think, part of what makes it fun too.
Absolutely.
I think, I've asked Steve Grad a few times, or I've seen him on TV a few times talking about what sports are best in terms of players autographing for fans, and he says hockey and baseball. And
absolutely,
and I think the fact that baseball is played in nice weather during the summer when kids are out of school really kind of allows kids to become fans, as opposed to other sports that are played in the winter or on the weekend where maybe they have chores or duties or their sports of their own. So I think baseball kind of cultivates that fandom just kind of by being played in the summer.
Absolutely. And, compared to football, I go autograph hunting at Panther games. You really get from when they park their car in the player parking lot and hope they stop at a fence and sign, and then that's really all you get besides training camp. And then even at training camp, you don't get much. Basketball, it's nearly impossible. If you can get to the team bus these days, you can do it. But baseball, I'm lucky enough to live near the Charlotte Knights, Hickory Crawdads, lots of great farm systems for some pro teams. And you go to those games, and especially with kids and the family and everything, you're getting everything you want signed. and they're more than happy to do it. They love talking with you, and it even extends into pro ball. I mean, if you're at a pro game and you're near the line and the pitcher's warming up and he's done and he's standing there, he'll sign some balls, toss you some balls. I mean, it's a really great thing, and something the Cubs are doing this year, which I think is awesome, is they're dedicating certain areas of their field before games for only children. So only kids can go there to get the autographs, which I think is wonderful because you go to a lot of these games and you get a lot of guys who are adults that own card shops. They're trying to get 500 signatures of each player when all a kid wants is a signed baseball. And so it's neat to see people like that, do that. So baseball definitely is one of the sports where they are the nicest when it comes to autographs. Now, I do have one story of a pretty bad experience with an autograph with baseball, but for the most part, they're pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead and share.
All right. Well, when I grew up in South Florida, and so we used to go to a lot of when I lived there, it was the Braves and the Mets that had spring training over in West Palm Beach. So I'd go to the Braves games and get baseball bats and everything signed, and they were playing the A's, and Jose Canseco came up, and I was a little kid, and I was starstruck. This was way before Jose Canseco became famous for needles and all that other stuff. And he walked right over to me and my sister, grabbed my Sharpie. I got all excited, signed about 50 autographs around me, walked right back past me, took my Sharpie, put it in his pocket and left and didn't sign my baseball. So not only did I not get a signature, I didn't even get my Sharpie back. But for the most part, they're great guys, but that'll always stick in my head, and probably one of the reasons I'll always hate Jose Canseco.
Absolutely. Let's switch a little bit and talk about. Let's go back and talk about your podcast. So, you guys, you guys do one thing that I think really helps the hobby a lot. Is you have the Scammer of the Week award. Tell fans about that.
Okay, well, I don't know how many of your fans are on Facebook, but if you are on Facebook and everything, I help run a site called Sports Card Scammers Exposed. And what we do is we pretty much patrol the hobby, and we make a list of people who have scammed other people. And the list is insane. The amount of scams is astronomical. It's absolutely ridiculous how many people get really, really screwed over in this hobby. And so our goal is to protect people from that. And I've been an admin there for almost 3 years. And as I was doing the podcast, I thought, well, we're reaching a much wider audience than just Facebook. A lot of these people don't know these people yet. And so we figured it would be best to do a segment on the show highlighting some of these scammers that are out there that are very, very good at what they do. They may be, scammers, and people may think, that they'd never fall for it, but these guys are very good at what they do. They practice it, and they're professionals at it. And so I just saw my podcast as a way that we could spread that news to other people. Now, we started an external website, sportscardscammers.info, that'll also have those lists so people that aren't on Facebook can have access to that list as well, because these people are everywhere. Once we find out you're a scammer, we pretty much make it where you're not selling cards on Facebook, and so obviously they're going to migrate elsewhere to try and continue these scams. And so we just me and Stu sat down and we talked, and we thought it would be a fun segment because there's some crazy stories. The one coming up next week on our show is an absolutely crazy story that got so big people were holding up signs on Monday Night Raw about it. We get some big ones and we get some crazy ones. But so, yeah, that's where it came from, and it was just a way to warn collectors of the people out there, because a lot of people are new into this. When I was new into this, I got taken by a lot of people, and that's the last thing we want. I'm in this hobby to one day pass down to my son. The last thing I want to do is leave it to him with as many scammers as there are now. So if we can help people and educate people and guide them in the right direction and give them a database to see, how these people are. Like, before you do a deal with somebody, check this list and see what they've done in the past. It's a great tool, and it saved a ton of people. I mean, I myself personally have also gone to a person's house who stole cards from someone and gotten them back. Like, I mean, we do everything we can to make sure that if someone's cards are taken, that they're gotten back. Because these aren't, people hear cards and they think, $3, $5 cards. No, some of these cards are $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 cards. I mean, it's no small feat nowadays.
Yeah, and that's really kind of a good way to police the hobby, and it's unfortunate that it's happening so prevalently and even more prevalently. But it's guys like you and everybody else who's working towards stopping that really we owe a debt of gratitude to. So let's finish up here. This podcast is a family podcast dedicated to the memory of my dad. I have a little daughter. You have a son.
Sure.
Give me a memory. Give me a story about collecting with you and your son.
Okay, well, my son just turned 3 2 weeks ago, and ever since he was 1 year old, he's been fascinated with my collection in my room. Like, it's on a big display and everything, and he's been fascinated by the colors and all that type of stuff. And I remember there's two memories that stick out the most. One would be the very first time I was pushing him through Walmart, and he made me stop. And instead of pointing at a toy, he said, "Daddy, you need to buy that." And he was pointing at a pack of cards. That made Dad feel good. The second one was probably about 6 months after that or so, which, when you get a card you like, you put it in something called a penny sleeve. It's just something to protect the card a little bit. Well, he comes running into my room and said, "Daddy, these are my favorite. I need some of those things." And he meant penny sleeves. And I handed it to him, and watching him put them into the penny sleeve so he could save them like Daddy was, you're a father, like you just said. Those are those moments that make you really, really happy. Because, like I said, that's what I'm in this for, is to be able to bond with him someday and to leave a really cool collection to him. And hopefully, I'm into collecting anything, whatever you like to collect, whatever you like to do. I think it's healthy. I think it's a great thing, and they're also wonderful investments. And so it's something that I hope. I mean, I met a ton of friends when I was younger doing this, and so it's something that I hope he gravitates toward. But with a dad like me who focuses so much on it, I'm pretty sure he's already there.
Absolutely. Hey, we got about 2 minutes left before we have to shut her down. So
sure.
Give me a little bit more information, and tell the fans and the listeners where they can find your podcast, your websites, your Facebook groups, all that kind of stuff. Last 2 minutes are yours.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I greatly appreciate you having me on board. Once again, the name of the show is Let Me Get That Podagraph, LEMME, Get That Podagraph. You can find us on Apple, SoundCloud, all the places you can find a podcast. On Twitter, it's at LGTP Podcast. On Instagram, LGT Podagraph. And on Facebook, it's the Let Me Get That Podagraph podcast. And I always answer right away. We love to talk with fans. We pride ourselves on being the most interactive podcast in the hobby. If you're a collector, reach out to us. We'd love to have you on the show. We have lots of great guests, Steve Grad, Tracy Hackler from Panini, lots of big people on the show. And Ultimate Twin Fan, I know you will be on here soon. But it's a great show, guys. We try and keep it fun. The one nice thing about the show is we're not held down by any company. So if you want the blunt and straight up truth about anything, come listen to our show, because we handle it with tact, but we're going to tell you the truth and about how we feel. We've been up for about 6 months. We're celebrating 6 months right now. So come check us out, guys.
Absolutely, and I can tell you guys, I've listened to most of their episodes, and the episode that they have where Steve Grad is a guest and he talks about a certain team faking autographs for over 40 years. It's pretty stunning. So
it's
like
pretty
Drew
crazy
said,
stuff.
It is. Go find them and make sure that may your mailboxes always be full. Thanks a lot, Drew. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Great to be on, buddy. You guys have a good one, and all your listeners, thanks for having me on, and hope you guys check out an episode.
Me too. Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Yep. All right, so that was Drew